Hello there. Welcome to video 134 from Sumit Academy. I do hope that you have subscribed to my channel. Do subscribe now so that you do not miss out on my previous or future videos. And do remember to like and share this video too. And if you want to drop in a line, I shall always be available at sumitacademy20@gmail.com. To make your task a little easier, here is a complete list of all the 134 videos available on my YouTube channel. The list is divided into the playlists under which they are available. Do have a look. This is the third and final part on our series on floods. In the first video, we had a look at the meaning of floods, their causes and effects, and as to how the government is trying to handle the situation. We also had a look at the probable reasons as to why, even after more than 70 years of independence, we are still struggling to control the flood situation. In the second video, we had a look at the National Disaster Management Guidelines on the Management of Floods, issued by the government in January 2008, and the action plans given in each chapter of the guidelines. We now come to a newer aspect of floods, and that is the ever increasing threat of urban floods. From Chennai to Gurgaon, all major cities are showing just what happens from poor planning, lack of adequate civil infrastructure, and sheer neglect and apathy on the part of the state governments and municipalities. Mumbai, for instance, is often referred as a prime example when it comes to discussing urban floods in India. A United Nations Habitat paper on monsoon floods in Mumbai mentions that even after 10 days of intense rainfall, The suburban and low-lying areas near the Mithi River remain waterlogged without services, appropriate shelter, potable water, or food. This area is estimated to have 70% occupancy by slums and payment dwellers, including one of the largest slums in the world, Dharavi. In any city, the low-lying regions like nalas, railway lines, roads, and highways, where squatter settlements pop up, are the areas which are most prone to flooding. This is typically the case in Delhi's Yamuna Pushta area. Yes, the same floodplain region where Akshardham and the Commonwealth Games village have been built, where slum areas flood almost each year now. Lack of discernment in development adds to this vulnerability of the poor. During the 2015 Chennai floods, some of the worst affected areas were slum resettlement tenements constructed by the government on floodplains or lake catchment areas at Semanancheri, Perumbakkam, and Azilnagar. These areas faced severe flooding and remained inhabitable for many days afterwards. The capacity of Indian states to withstand heavy rains has also weakened owing to land use changes and interference with natural watersheds. Notwithstanding the improved accuracy of forecasts and communications, cities have ended up becoming more vulnerable to floods. The authorities have prioritized cities for economic growth and employment generation, but without any focus on protection of water bodies and water channels. Reclaiming large tracts of land for buildings has left many cities bereft of wetlands and water bodies that can absorb urban outflows during the monsoon. Consequently, recurring urban floods are an annual occurrence today. In an urban setting, flooding results in large-scale disruption of power, transport, water supply, sanitation, and other basic utilities. This, in turn, can pose additional problems, resulting in a crisis that is unmanageable owing to its sheer volume and intensity. With the capacity of the administration stretched to the limits, the affected people end up the worst sufferers. Who is responsible? The fact is that our cities have been built with little or no regard to the natural topography and severely lack holistic action. Even with provisions of rainwater harvesting and sustainable urban drainage systems in regulatory mechanisms like the Environmental Impact Assessment, the EIA notification of 2006, or building bylaws of almost every state, adoption at user end has, as well as enforcement agencies, remains weak. Public bodies' focus is largely on desilting of stormwater drains before the monsoon and expansion of the overburdened infrastructure, but sadly at a crawling pace. Keeping this ever-increasing threat in view, the government issued the National Disaster Management Guidelines on the management of urban flooding in September 2010. Let's have a look at this. As a part of its mandate, the National Disaster Management Authority, the NDMA, has been making efforts to prepare guidelines for the management of different disasters and some cross-cutting themes. In the past, any strategy on flood disaster management largely focused on riverine floods affecting large extents of rural areas. Realizing that the causes of urban flooding are different, and so also are the strategies to deal with them, the NDMA has for the first time addressed urban flooding as a separate disaster, delinking it from floods. How is urban flooding different? Well, urban areas are centers of economic activities with vital infrastructure which needs to be protected 24/7. In most of the cities, damage to vital infrastructure has a bearing not only locally but could even have global implications. Even the secondary effects of possible epidemics and exposure to infection takes further toll in terms of loss of livelihood, human suffering, and loss of life. Therefore, management of urban flooding has to be accorded top priority. Increasing trend of urban flooding is a universal phenomenon and poses a great challenge to urban planners the world over. Problems associated with urban floods range from relatively localized incidents to major incidents, resulting in cities being inundated from a few hours to several days. Therefore, the impact can also be widespread, including temporary relocation of people, damage to civic amenities, deterioration of water quality, and risk of epidemics. Now, what is the urban flood risk in India? There has been an increasing trend of urban flood disasters in India over the past several years, whereby major cities in India have been severely affected. The most notable amongst them are Hyderabad, Ahmedabad, Delhi, Chennai, Mumbai, Surat, Kolkata, Jamshedpur, Guwahati, Uttarakhand, Kashmir and Gurgaon, Bengaluru, and the states of Assam and Bihar. The story is endless. The urban heat island effect has resulted in an increase in rainfall over urban areas. Global climate change is resulting in changed weather patterns and increased episodes of high intensity rainfall events occurring in shorter periods of time. Then the threat of sea level rise is also looming large, threatening all the coastal cities. Cities and towns located on the coast, on river banks, upstream and downstream of dams, inland cities, and in hilly areas can all be affected. Stormwater drainage systems in the past were designed for rainfall intensity of 12 to 20 mm. These capacities have been getting very easily overwhelmed whenever rainfall of higher intensity has been experienced. Further, the systems very often do not work to the designed capacities because of very poor maintenance. Encroachments are also a major problem in many cities and towns. Natural streams and watercourses have formed over thousands of years due to the forces of flowing water in the respective watersheds. Habitation started growing into towns and cities alongside rivers and watercourses. As a result of this, the flow of water has increased in proportion to the urbanization of the watersheds. Ideally, the natural drains should have been widened. Now, this is exactly, you can say similar to road widening for increased traffic. Now, why should it be done? To accommodate the higher flows of storm water. On the contrary, there have been large scale encroachments on the natural drains and river flood plains. Consequently, the capacity of the natural drains has decreased, resulting in flooding. Improper disposal of solid waste, including domestic, commercial, and industrial waste, and dumping of construction debris into the drains also contributes significantly to reducing their capacities. It is imperative that better operations and maintenance actions are taken up by the municipalities. Now, what role can science and technology have in such a situation? Well, the management of urban flooding is an emerging subject, and as such, it has to be treated holistically in a multidisciplinary manner. There are many issues that need to be considered in order to develop sound, reliable, and most representative urban flood and disaster management strategies. A significant part of this management framework is dependent upon the use of science and technology for improved monitoring, modeling and forecasting, and decision support systems. One way of improving the preparedness for urban flooding is by setting up a vulnerability based geospatial framework to generate and analyze different scenarios. This will help in identifying and planning for the most effective and appropriate actions in a dynamic way to incorporate day to day changes that take place in urban areas, having the potential to alter the prevailing vulnerability profile. Right, now let's have a look at the structure of the guidelines. These guidelines are an important step towards the development of plans for the management of urban flooding. These have been prepared to provide guidance to ministries and departments, states and union territories, and urban local bodies for the preparation of the disaster management plans. These guidelines call for a proactive, participatory, well structured, fail safe, multidisciplinary, and multi sector approach at various levels. An international Indo US workshop with the theme Urban Flood Disaster Management, Administrative, Technical, and Scientific Issues was organized in Hyderabad from 7th to 9th of January 2008, jointly by the NDMA and the United States Agency for International Development. Now, this one, USAID, is the United States government agency which is primarily responsible for administering civilian foreign aid. This workshop was conducted to get an overview of the American practices for managing urban flooding and to incorporate the feasible measures in the NDMA guidelines. There was extensive coverage of key issues related to urban flood disaster management, such as flood risk management state and local roles, urban regulation issues, role of science and technology in flood disaster management, flood risk communication and perception, development of flood warning and response systems. Emergency management technologies for monitoring and mitigation of flooding events, impact of global climate change on planning for flood management, and of course, future research and development priorities were also discussed. The guidelines which were then formulated are presented in 10 chapters. So let's have a bird's eye view of these chapters. The first chapter provides an introductory review about how urban flooding is different from riverine flooding, factors contributing to urban flooding, different weather systems in India, variability of rainfall, different city scenarios, and of course, the genesis of the guidelines. The second chapter provides present status of the institutional framework at the national, state, and the local levels, role of central ministries and departments, states and urban local bodies, and other local authorities and organizations. The third chapter discusses present status of flood forecasting, warning, and communication system. The gaps are identified and recommendations have been made for enhancing capabilities using state-of-the-art equipment. The fourth chapter reviews the existing international and national status and practices for the design and maintenance of urban drainage systems. Gaps have been identified and recommendations made to develop efficient drainage systems with improved operations and maintenance actions. The fifth chapter covers urban flood risk management issues, vulnerability analysis, risk assessment and hazard mapping, damage assessment, and data generation options, etc. The sixth chapter looks at town planning concepts, central and state legislations, and a gist of relevant provisions under layout approvals and building permissions. The seventh chapter deals with the response actions, including putting in place an incident response system, while chapter 8 deals with capacity development at institutional and community levels, awareness generations, and the role of different stakeholders, and the need for proper documentation of events and actions. The ninth chapter deals with implementation strategies, mainstreaming of disaster management into development planning, role of nodal ministry, mobilization of financial resources, and implementation methodology, etc. And finally, the 10th chapter provides a chapter-wise summary of action points. Right, let's study the gist of some of these key action points. First, Ministry of Urban Development will be the nodal ministry for urban flooding. Second, establishment of the Urban Flooding Cell in Ministry of Urban Development, state nodal departments and urban local bodies. Third, establishing a technical umbrella for urban flood forecasting and warning, both at the national level and state and union territory levels. Fourth, the India Meteorological Department will establish a local network cell. Fifth, establishment of local network of automatic rainfall gauges for real-time monitoring with a density of 1 in every 4 square kilometer in all the 2,325 class 1, 2 and 3 tier cities and towns. Sixth, strategic expansion of Doppler weather radar network in the country to cover all urban areas for enhanced local scale forecasting capabilities with maximum possible lead time. Seventh, India Meteorological Department will develop a protocol for subdivision of urban areas on the basis of watershed and then issue rainfall forecast on the watershed basis. Eighth, establishing urban flood early warning system. Ninth, catchment will be the basis for design of stormwater drainage system. 10th, watershed will be the basis for all urban flooding disaster management actions. 11th, all 2,325 class 1, 2 and 3 cities and towns will be mapped on the GIS platform. 12. Contour mapping will be prepared at 0.2 to 0.5 meter contour interval. 13. Inventory of the existing stormwater drainage system will be prepared on a GIS platform. 14th. Future stormwater drainage systems will be designed with a runoff coefficient of up to 0.95 in using rational method, taking into account the approved land use pattern. 15. Pre-monsoon desilting of drains will be completed before 31st of March every year. 16th. Involve the resident welfare associations, the RWAs, and community-based organizations, the CBOs, in monitoring this and in all urban flood disaster management actions. 17. Every building shall have rainwater harvesting as an integral component of the building utility. 18th. Encroachments on drains and in floodplains will be removed by providing alternative accommodation to the poor people. 19th. Better compliance of the techno-legal regime will be ensured. 20th. Establishing the incident response system for coordinated response actions. 21. Capacity development at the community and institutional level to enhance urban flood disaster management capabilities. The NGOs have graduated from being mere relief organizations to focusing on rehabilitation, reconstruction, and mitigation. Women's self-help groups and other grassroots organizations are involved in the disaster mitigation process. Community media is being used as a tool to spread awareness. Government resources are also being tapped so as to work in coordination with them for optimum utilization of resources. It is in this background that a strategic collaboration between the institutions of state and the institutions of civil society has to be worked out in order to facilitate better community based disaster response in Indian cities. Civil society needs to consider the enhancement of the socio-economic conditions of the poor, alleviate poverty, and improvement of livelihood of these vulnerable groups. 22nd, massive public awareness programs covering solid waste disposal, problems of encroachments, and relevance of techno-legal regime, besides all other important aspects. 23rd, involve elected public representatives in awareness generation. They have to be sensitized on all the factors related to urban floods and made responsible to play a major role in generating public awareness. 24th, media has a major role in generating public awareness. Media persons should be sensitized about all aspects of urban flooding and appropriate training modules should be prepared for them. It is only after all important aspects of urban flooding are clearly understood by them that they can put things across to the people with a proper perspective. Steps will be taken to evolve appropriate media campaign covering radio, visual and print media. Besides the production of printed materials like brochures, pamphlets and posters. 25th, organizations cannot learn from failures if people do not discuss and analyze them. Faithful and accurate documentation of all aspects of disaster events is essential for creating good historical records. And finally, become the data source for future research and mitigation planning. You see, documentation shall cover all aspects of early warning, communication, design and maintenance, successful actions and failures, and the results thereof, covering search and rescue, evacuation, management of food shelters, food and water supply, restoration of essential services, public health issues, management of traffic, and all other activities. As the incidence of climate variability and extreme weather event increases and urban flooding becomes more and more common, it is inevitable that we look at the issue from a broad-based perspective. Focus has to be on increasing the resilience of communities and adaptive capacities of our infrastructure. Water sensitive urban design and planning techniques, especially in the context of implementation, are of utmost importance. These methods take into consideration the topography, types of surfaces, natural drainage, and leave very less impact on the environment. Vulnerability analysis and risk assessment should form part and parcel of city master plans. In a changing climate, our proposed infrastructure, especially the stormwater drainage, has to be built considering the new normals. Tools such as predictive precipitation modeling can help do that and are also able to link it with the adaptive capacity of urban land use. Most important is strong land use controls. Enforcement will remain vital to ensure that fragile wetlands and floodplains are not concretized. Disabling spawning of squatter settlements in sensitive zones by providing adequate affordable housing will reduce number of persons vulnerable to changing climate. Now all this means urban local bodies will continue to have a central role to play in cities' battles with extreme weather events such as flooding and their overall resilience. The importance of cities as vehicles of economic growth and development are well realized by the authorities. Yet, changing land use patterns in utter disregard of the natural channels and water bodies that have controlled urban outflows for centuries is costing everyone very dearly. Unless we revamp our theories of urban planning and give due importance to watersheds, the erratic weather patterns and rainfall characteristic of climate change will throw up frequent natural disasters in our urban centers. And these will be very difficult to manage given population densities, which multiply every problem several times over. Well, that's all from me in this video. This video is based on the information freely available on the internet. No originality is claimed for the same. The intention of this video is only to prepare candidates for answering examination questions on the subject and not for any financial gain. Do like and share this video and do subscribe to my channel now so that you do not miss out on my previous or future videos. And if you wish to drop in a line, I shall always be available at sumitacademy20@gmail.com. Till later then, cheerio.